People who grew up middle upper class, what did you not believe about low income households but it was actually true? That a vacation isn't yearly, it's a once in a lifetime event. At this time of year I'm reminded that our vacations growing up were always a trip to a relative's house. Never stayed in a hotel until I was an adult. I'll share a story that woke me up. I was a manager on a PC refresh, where we had employees out in the field. Since they were traveling, one of their perks was that we gave them $50 a day for food. All they had to do was send in their receipts. I was approving receipts for the week and noticed that one of our employees had only submitted a receipt for $25. So I called him to make sure he understand how the reimbursement process worked and to ask for the rest of his receipts, which typically were around $300 a week. He told me that all he bought for the week was bread and bologna, since he didn't have the money to front the expenses, which is why the receipt was so low. I was floored. And that is when I started to realize what it means to not have any savings or access to credit. Needless to say, we fronted him the money the next week. That people use credit cards because they didn't have the money at the time, instead of a convenient way to earn points by paying cards off in full each month. I learned this after moving away for university. Turns out loan payments and paychecks don't always come in at convenient times. That some kids only got hand-me-down clothes and rarely got something new of their own. I went to private school and there was a girl that I assume was on scholarship financial aid and she always smelled really bad. I saw her putting on deodorant in the bathroom once and I guess I must have stared a second too long because she told me that she didn't have anything clean to wear because her mom didn't have money for the laundromat that week. I couldn't believe that people had to wear dirty clothes until they could go to the laundromat. I just thought everyone had a washing machine in their house. A high school by me recently added a laundry room for students to use if they had a need. They can talk to the coordinator, move loads between classes, and have clean clothing available by the end of the day. Not something I couldn't believe, but something I didn't really realize. The temperature of the house is strictly controlled in the houses of lower income people that I know. When I was a kid, I'd turn the heat up to 80 and set the AC at 65. I'm having this fight in my house currently. My sister and her kids are from Florida. She grew up here though. They are constantly putting the thermostat up to 70. I'm constantly putting it back down to 68. In the summer they put the central air down to 66. I fight to keep it at 78. I had to tell them I can't afford a $300 energy bill unless they want another month without internet like last month because I can't afford to pay both. Edit. 78 not 74. Well, my dad grew up extremely poor and because of this he worked very hard to make sure we were middle class and that myself and my siblings were better off than he was. The one story he always told us that I almost couldn't believe was that in school, can't remember what grade level or how old he was, but he had an art assignment to draw his favorite pair of shoes. He didn't have a favorite pair. He only had one pair of sneakers that he had had for over a year. They were atty and gross but that's all his family could afford. He was embarrassed and didn't do the project and his teacher pointed it out in class, so my dad just walked up to his desk, took a shoe off, placed it on the teacher's desk, and just said that's why. The teacher didn't know what to say, so my dad took his shoes and sat back down. That story always blew my mind and made me realize how lucky I was since I didn't have to worry about where my shoes were coming from. That actually I now drive my mom crazy because I make sure to use my shoes and other clothes as long as I can even though they are extremely old, but it makes me feel a little better knowing I'm using things to the fullest rather than until they're out of season or anything like that. What it meant to not be able to afford something, or to be broke. My parents would say, "We can't afford that." But it really meant we'd rather spend that $1,000 on ourselves on our next vacation whatever instead of on a new toy computer phone for you. We're broke meant we've used too much money in our checking account. We'd still have saving accounts and investments, of course. So no money really just meant no more money that we should be spending right now. Because I grew up this way. I viewed money as something that just magically never ran out. I would get really annoyed when my friends would say, "I can't afford that," or "I'm broke" as a reason for not doing something. Because I viewed it as an excuse instead of a reality. The first time as an adult when I literally couldn't afford something. Because the $50 check I had deposited hadn't gone through and so my debit card was declined. Was a surreal and horrible feeling. I suddenly understood what "I'm broke and I can't afford" that really meant. That some people can't afford to fill up their car with petrol. I loved when I used to read articles of money saving tips hoping for something new to me. When they started out with save $5 a day by cutting out pricey coffee drinks. I knew I could just close a tap because if I had $5 to spend on coffee every day, I sure as hell wouldn't be walking to work the last 3 days of every pay period because I was out of gas. That was a few years and a couple of jobs ago. I no longer struggle to buy gasoline. Just how little money people are paid. When I was younger, I figured that approximately $40,000 was the lowest someone could earn. Lol. Minimum wage full-time is about $12,000. I checked because I thought you were full of shit. And yep. $15K before taxes. Way worse than I thought. That some people have never been out of state. I thought that everyone took vacations multiple times a year. Some people never leave the county they grew up in. 25 plus years ago I drove my sister, her friend, and a few others to the amusement park, and that was the first time my sister's 15-year-old friend had been out of the county we lived in. Note, county not country. Counties are what our states and UK countries are subdivided into, along with other countries. In the UK, I have genuinely encountered people from wealthy and rural backgrounds who genuinely thought that house numbers were only an American thing, and that every house in Britain had a name. I'd hate to be a postman if that were the case. From the flip side, when I was in college, I actually lost friends because I couldn't afford to do the activities they did. Like going to bars every weekend. Or going to multiple concerts, raves, festivals over the summer. It was partly about not having the money. And partly about not being able to take time off work. It was embarrassing to be 20 and tell other 20-year-olds I couldn't afford what they took for granted. So I'd tell them I didn't like bars or I didn't like raves. They took that to mean I didn't like them. I always thought people talking about their fridge being empty was an exaggeration. Like there's plenty of food, just nothing you want to eat. Then I started dating a girl who didn't have a lot of money. And I opened the fridge door and saw only Hawaiian punch and ketchup. And I was just like, well shit. My wife and I grew up very blue collar. Now we are doing quite well for ourselves. What was really hard for us to realize is how much people rely on each other at the blue collar level. People don't have much, so they have social networks to help each other out. Go to any blue collar neighborhood and you'll see kids outside playing, adults out socializing, people working on their cars, etc. Go to an upper middle class or wealthy neighborhood and for the most part you won't see those things. Poorer people need their social network to survive. The difficult part for the upwardly mobile is that once you make enough money to leave blue collar life, the social protection tends to go away as well. Randy down the street isn't going to fix your furnace for a case of beer. Your neighbor Jim isn't going to help you dig that hole in your yard in exchange for watching his kids so he and his wife can see a movie tomorrow night. Stuff like that does happen with the wealthy, but not nearly as much as with the lower income folks. To us at least. It seems like the more a person gains in wealth, the more they lose with the sense of community. I could be wrong. Eating out at restaurants isn't common for everyone. My mom gave a girl on my basketball team a ride home from an away game. I can't remember what the reason. We decided to grab a bite to eat and asked her if she had a preference. She picked a buffet place, saying that it is where her family goes. Turns out it was the only restaurant she'd been to, other than fast food from time to time. A few months later she was with us at an Italian place that was slightly upscale. She didn't know how to order. So my mom did it for her. For dessert, she asked for cherry cheesecake and then whispered to me that she just scraped the cherries off. I flagged down the server and had them change it to plain cheesecake. I felt so sorry for her because she was just uncomfortable. I also realized I was pretty spoiled and appreciated my parents much more. When I got to college, realized that some students were paying their own way. That was humbling. I wasn't exactly from a rich family, but couldn't get my mind around that. When I was little, I didn't understand why my friends' families didn't just save money to make life better. My parents always taught me how to save money and showed me their savings for things like family vacations, new cars, and emergencies, unexpected home repairs, etc. If you want something, just work hard and save for it. Right? Have a little self-discipline. Until I was older, I simply didn't get that for many people there was no money to be saved in the first place, or that it all could be wiped out in a single instance. It really put the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps concept into perspective for me. It's not something I believe in anymore. You don't just get up and go to the doctor when you are sick. Or for a yearly physical. Edit, yes. Here in the US, a good friend sums it up for me. Doctors are for rich people. I pay for health insurance, bare minimum, each month. But I almost never actually go to the doctor. People tell me, oh, you're coming down with something? Go to the doctor. They just don't understand that I have medical insurance effectively, so that if I need a $75,000 surgery, it's just so I low $35,000 worth of debt. Not $75,000. I thought that lower income black neighborhoods were crime ridden because the people didn't care, didn't work, and didn't have the same moral footing. Then I moved into a very rough neighborhood and was the only white guy. My neighbors were amazing. Hard workers who struggled to make ends meet. Took no shit from the troublemakers who littered. Bought old Drew Gus, etc. Had a deep and strong community network. And wanted all the same things I wanted. Was truly eye-opening. That some families are so poor their children only went to school for the free food. That kids had to share rooms with their siblings. I thought that it only happened in the movies. If you come from a large family, room sharing will happen even if you're middle class. I was upper middle class, and I shared a room with my brother up until I moved out. Our house even had a guest bedroom. I just never thought to ask. Kids doing bad at school were not always bad students or lazy. They didn't have enough to eat, were malnourished and couldn't concentrate. That not everyone has a passport. People give Americans shit for this, but it's pointless to have one if you are so poor you'll never be able to leave the country anyway. I ride horses and I was shocked to learn that one of my friends had never been on a horse before. Her response was, horseback riding in America is not a poor person thing. Edit, I live in suburban Florida, where horseback riding is not a poor person thing. I grew up poor and my husband grew up rich. He didn't know that people eat top ramen for dinner or how to make it. I had to teach my 23-year-old boyfriend how to boil ducking water and put noodles in. That's not necessarily a rich thing. My father grew up dirt poor and he still doesn't know how to make even the most basic things. That was women's work in his generation. Jesus Christ. I'm only realizing now that my childhood consisted of worrying about basic needs, which is actually a completely alien concept to well-off people. That even if you work hard, you can still end up struggling for basics. I was, naively, taught that if you're an amazing student you can get a scholarship to college and after that a high-paying job. It almost made it seem like if you did not apply yourself and work hard, then it was your own fault. But when I saw a few families where both parents worked really hard and had decent careers, nurse, X-ray tech, massage therapist at a top spa, and no matter how many shifts and hours worked, they seemed to be struggling for even the basics. That just opened my eyes in a new way. Minor inconveniences for normal people, parking tickets, a malfunctioning fridge, a flat tire, etc. are potentially catastrophic for poor people with no financial cushions. I was so poor as a kid that the week of the month the government cheese block was delivered was exciting for me. And horribly depressing when the cheese ran out. Because it meant 3 more weeks of no cheese. It was exciting because everything else I ate was so bad that this cheese was delicious and the only real highlight in my life at that point. The silence. I grew up in the Eddie Murphy jive talking black man era and assumed poor people were motor mouths. Nope. Ends up all those studies that show rich people use twice as many words with their kids are correct. I dated a low-income woman once and her sister would just leave her baby in the playpen all day and not say a word to it. Huh. My GF grew up in a lower income house than I did. And she talks way less than I do. I really have to encourage her to open up and talk about things. I wonder if it's related. I'm really late to this, but here goes. I didn't realize that some kids had to work to help their family pay the bills. I realized this at military boot camp. I joined the military because I failed out of college the first go round. My bunkmate got his first paycheck and told me how excited he was to send it to his parents so that they could pay the electric bill. I got my first paycheck and left it in my footlocker because I didn't have any other use for it. He later told me that he joined the military because he knew that the electricity would always be on. That the hot water can run out. It was a concept completely foreign to me and I only found out that it runs out for other households through the internet. Don't have to be poor for hot water to run out. Typical tank style hot water heaters aren't able to provide endless amounts of hot water. If the whole family takes showers one after the other and someone starts the dishwasher and clothes washer, that water is gonna start coming out cold. That many kids did not eat lunch at school because there was no program and or their family just didn't have the money resources. As a low-income person, I'm surprised and saddened by some of these answers. But it makes sense. What I consider normal is kinda awful to others, I guess. That each dollar is more important to a low-income household because each dollar is more needed. That is, that a percent tax, especially a flat tax, can be quite regressive.